Hi and welcome to this third tutorial in our series about extending Pano2VR with JavaScript. After the first both tutorials covering the basics and the foundation of the JavaScript API of Pano2VR and development setup in the second part, we are going now to have a look at a practical example. I've prepared a little tour for this. It's opened here, and we have a short tour in the government district in Berlin with 5 panoramas. They are connected together to a little tour and showing the Federal Chancellery, the Reichstag and the Republic Square, and at the Spree River some of the modern buildings in the government district. This is a very simple tour. It's based on the Venice skin, a factory skin from Pano2VR. It's a little bit extended, and this is the finished project. I want to show what we want to achieve with this tutorial. We have some descriptions here in the lower left corner in the description box. And you see a headline and you see some text about the location. If I change it, this changes as well. We have a title. This part is added to the Venice skin. Here in the upper left corner you see a little text box for development purposes. It just gives us a little hint what's happening here. Usually, if you have some nodes, you can add in the user data some descriptions or titles or something like that. In this project, we will replace this usual way we have by adding text from external HTML files. These files, here you see the file name, what's currently loaded to fill up this information box. And if I change the node, you will see this changes as well, and this text is not coming from inside the skin or from inside the project. It's coming from external prepared content files. And this tutorial should be a good example for the splitting of function and content. These external files can be edited without opening the skin editor after it's finished. And the project here is the start. It's visible in the file name. And the project isn't made by having the description or the title. You see you have a title here. And you have as a description only the word dummy. It's valid for all of the nodes. And from here on we are going further and add some JavaScript programming to load external HTML files and push the data found in these files into this information box we have in the lower left corner. It isn't necessary to do this, as you can fill in it here in the main app of Pano2VR. But imagine you have the project finished and your client, let's say the commission project, and your client wants to change some text later. Then he should give you a call and you change this in the Pano2VR file in this box, and you make a new description, update the project and push everything out and replace some files on the server of the client. And so the client only needs to get this external file, edit this, replace it on the server, only this single file, and everything is updated. And the functional part and the panorama image and all the interactivity isn't touched at all when you do such a strategy. So the splitting of function and content is a very popular way to keep workflows easy, especially after project is finished and the client or you yourself want to update some content inside of a 360 virtual tour. Before we start to work on this project, let's have a short inspection on our start position where we go from. And this is a finished project, it's online. And now let's go to the Pano2VR file, and just let's have a short view on what we have done so far to get the startup up and running. We have 5 panoramas. They have a title and they have a user description dummy, which will be replaced by JavaScript later with real texts. We have a tour map. Here it's a map box with a style attached from my Mapbox account, and nothing special. I just wanted to have a little bit other looks than usual satellite imagery, so you can have it in grayscale with some yellow descriptions. It's just for fun. I use another map, then it's OpenStreetMap or Google Maps, just another style. And if we have a look into our skin, it is based on the Venice factory skin. I opened this, and it's the usual way I recommend to work with. Open the Venice skin or select the Venice skin here, just this way. It is a factory skin living in the system folder, and if I open it, it's pretty normal, and I just saved it into my project folder, and the result is what we see here. You have $D Venice start. This is a skin attached to the project when we start to work on. I've marked only one element I changed. I changed this black and white pin here with the color chooser, and let's have a yellow one to make it fit to the yellow descriptions in the map. So it should work this way, or the inner circle is yellow now. Let's do it with the outer circle of the pin as well. So we have now a yellow pin. That's the only element I changed from the original skin, and I saved it as Venice_start into my system folder, and if I close it and save it, I can head over to creating it in the output folder, pretty much usual, and let's start it. And here we go, and we have our map, and it's a black and white map with yellow descriptions I styled in the Mapbox style, and the yellow pins I just styled in the skin. Here is the box, which is changing only the title when I'm changing the node, and this will be the target of our action we are introducing later with JavaScript. So that's the starting point we have. And if we have a look at our file structure, we have the file we are just starting with. Here is the start skin. The other both yellow marked versions are the finished ones. We have some panoramas, and we have the output folder to view it in the web browser. And here's a material folder. This is top secret and has some stuff for me to build into this project later. So we will fill up this folder with stuff we need to get this thing up and running. The next step in our project is to prepare the content files, the external HTML files we want to load later into our Pano2VR project using JavaScript. I choose HTML files as an external content source, as it is already in the right format to be displayed inside of our skin elements, as they consist also of HTML. So we need no conversion or something else. So we can use this HTML content right away. How do we get this content? For this example, I choose Wikipedia as a content source, and let's move to an article for the Federal Chancellery. This is the building here, and in Wikipedia I made a bookmark for it. We have an article about this chancellery, and what I want to do is to have this text, this short intro text of a Wikipedia article, as my description, as we see it from the point of view from Pano2VR, our user data description. And I copy this text and just hit copy. And now we need to get this text as HTML. You see it's pretty much formatted with bold, with a lot of links, with red links and blue links in Wikipedia. And we want to get rid of this all. And so I just copy this and go to an HTML editor. You can use some offline apps, like if you have the Adobe Creative Cloud, you can use Dreamweaver or other tools, but you find a lot of HTML editors, visual HTML editors in the web. I choose this, and this is a simple WYSIWYG editor. What you see is what you get, and it is a user interface like we have it in Word or other text processing apps. And I just click into this edit pane, choose Control Command A and delete all this stuff and paste my text in here to this text box. If you paste it without any other options, then you get the same text as you see here in Wikipedia. All links and all the code which stands behind this text is also copied and pasted. That's not what I want. I just remove it, and most text editors have a paste as plain text, and that's what I want. And now you paste it in here and you get a blank text without any formatting or without any links and so on. I'm cleaning up it a little bit. Just remove this here and and removing these accessories here, or these little marks, and let's say it's okay. So, and I'm making a new line, and now I'm copying the title, or the part of the title I want to copy, and also paste it in here. And you see now the formatting is also copied and pasted, and you can remove any formatting. The most of these text editors by this button, remove format, and then you can be sure that it is clean. You have a style here, the paragraph format. This should be on normal, and this should be on heading 1. It's the same as in Wikipedia, so it's okay. We can leave it here. And what's now our way to get a content file is to head over to this little button. This is the source code. And if I click on it, you get the plain text with minimal formatting. And I copy this code, copy. Because this is live in the web browser, you cannot save it from here. At least with this editor not. There are some others. And you see it starts with HTML, head, title, head, body, and so on. So it's a complete but very simplified HTML file. And we copy this source code, and then we are heading over to our project. First of all, we need some structure here. And I'm going into the root of our project. This is a folder in where everything is happening here. We have our Pano2VR files, our skin files, and the output file for visiting the virtual tour in the browser, and the source panorama images. And you see this little button, and I create a new folder. Its name is content. And inside of this content folder, I create a new file, and I name it Federal Chancellery. There should be a double L to make it correct here, and the ending is HTML. And this file is now opened, and just paste the code. So we have the code here, and I need the word wrap. With our extension setting here, we built up in the second tutorial. There we have a shortcut for making the text soft wrap. It should be Option Z. And now we have a simplified HTML, and we are only interested in this part, the body. That's what we read out later. We can clean up some identifiers we don't need here. So that's a really absolutely basic setup we have for an external text file. We have a headline and we have a text body. You see there's a red bracket. I omitted the closing bracket here in the text, and as it is a code editor, it warns you if a bracket is somewhere opened but not closed, even if it's plain text and no code here. So you get a warning here. So this is our first content file we want to read into the Pano2VR project later. To finish my content preparation, I just copy some prepared files, the 4 ones we need for the other 4 nodes in our little project, and I'm going into the Finder and jump to the folder we have here. This is a single file we created just in the last clip. And now let's head over to some other files we want to have here. Should be these 4, copy, and I'll paste it here. And these are the same, they have the same structure. And we see here this, and this. And now we have a ready content folder for filling up our info boxes in the lower left corner of our project. After preparing our 5 content files with HTML content for our node description, we return to Pano2VR, and now let's have a look at some basic preparations for our file. This is the original file I made with a slightly modified Venice skin. I named it Berlin Start, and the skin is also Venice Start, in the same manner. And now let's save this as a work version, so we have a backup in case we need to return to the original state of the project, Berlin work. And now let's open the skin and let's save it as Venice work. And it's always the same folder, our project folder, where this file should live. Now close it, and usually after closing a new saved or renamed skin file, it is automatically after closing added with a new version here in the skin section of our output panel. Of course, you can select it manually here, but now we have it. Let's save it, and we have our starting point to work at what we want. The first step in our new project is to organize external files. So we head over to the lowest section of our properties panel when we are in the output mode here, and now let's have a look on the files and folders, and we need to prepare something before. I just changed to Visual Studio Code. You can do it in the Finder or Explorer as well. So we have a content folder, and the next one I want to add is the lib folder for library. So I go to the main, to the project root, so to say, and make a new folder, and it's called lib, and enter. It stays empty for the moment, and we now add these 2 folders to be integrated into the output when we export the project with the cogwheel and generate the project with these new external files, and to make sure that they are integrated into the HTML output when we export it. So add folder, and now we get the content folder open, and now we get, as a second folder, we get the new library folder open. So now all these files, our content files with the 5 HTML files and our lib folder with the future CSS and JavaScript files are ready to be integrated into the output. To let Pano2VR know which of these 5 HTML files is to be loaded when a certain node is entered, we need to connect these files to our nodes and let the nodes know what to load. So I'm going to a panorama. Let's start with the first one, and we have our user data here, and we can of course use some unused fields and work with placeholders. That's one way to do it, but I'm using the custom properties for this and add a new custom property which is now attached to all nodes under the user data. And we have a description, external HTML file, and the variable name should only contain numbers, letters and underscores, and I name it external HTML file. It is text. There is no default value, as it makes no sense to have a default file here, because as a default, when nothing is to be loaded into this box in the lower left corner of the panorama interface, then we have dummy as a description. When the loading fails, we always see dummy. So that doesn't matter here. And I click OK, and now let's add these file names here. I'm switching to Visual Studio Code, and we have our content folder, and here we are now on the bridge. Right mouse click, copy name to clipboard. This is a function that is not available out of the box here. We can copy the path or just rename the file and then copy it here. So mark it and copy it all, but there's a very nice thing with Visual Studio Code extensions. I added this little helper here. Just look for copy file name. I added it here, and it is a very, very simple plugin, and it adds in the right mouse button menu here at the last position. It adds copy name to clipboard. Head over to my user data, paste it here, and now you have the HTML file to be loaded for this node is entered here. And I'm just doing it for the other ones, and go to the chancellery, copy name to clipboard, and enter it here. One, and the next is the Lüdes house. Should be this here. Paste. And we have, let's check it, Republic Square. This one. Paste, and the last one is the Riverbank. So and now all panoramas should have a valid file name attached to it, and so we can move on. With filling up the user data custom properties, we are now done with the main app in our project, and head over to the skin to make some additions we need for the further work. And I'm opening the skin editor. Now we are asked custom properties from the project have been added as variable to the skin. This little hint is showing up after you introduce a new custom property, either to hotspots or to nodes, and they will be transferred to the skin as variables. We will see it soon. Okay, and if you are now going to the general properties with deselecting everything in the tree, or just hitting an empty space in the stage here, you can see the general properties of the skin, and there we have the variables, and at the very bottom you have external HTML file, and is attached as a user data variable. and we have it now available for further work. You see there is a lot of variables here involved, and we have a factory skin, and that is the right point now to make very important remarks on how to deal with factory skins. Factory skins are mainly made for using them, not for modifying them or for editing them. They are very complex constructions. You see you have a lot of variable values, even with logic blocks for their default values and so on, and you can just arbitrarily click into some stuff here and you see they are really sophisticated and very elaborated, and it is very difficult to deconstruct such a complex construction like the version 7 skins. They are really meant for using it. And don't touch anything when you're not knowing exactly what you are doing. There are some little things inside of the skins which can break the whole skin if you modify anything. So it's strongly recommended, if you modify a skin, make a copy and leave the skin in the application support folder on a Mac or in the app roaming data folder on the PC. Leave them where they are, don't modify them. The best way is to write protect them. You can reinstall them if something happens, but you can save this if you put them on a read-only mode. And the first action I did before already is to copy this factory skin to your project directory so you can modify it and you leave the original skin untouched. If you modify a skin, you can change some colors, as I did here for the map pin. I changed it here in the SVG image section with the color chooser to make my own colors for this pin. That's pretty okay. That doesn't break anything. And the other stuff you want to add, just do it on top and take care of not changing variables. You can read them, but you shouldn't alter them if you don't know exactly what you're doing. So let's add some stuff we need for our project, and everything is only added to the skin. I don't modify any skin element besides this map pin. I don't modify any skin element. I only add some new stuff, and it is kind of isolated from the functioning skin. So I'm clicking with the command key here to deselect this pin, or clicking in the empty stage area, and now I'm adding a small container, and this container is usually actions and scripts, and it usually lives on the top of the tree. It is not visible, it is only functional. What I usually do is to add a text field to it, and this text field for me is mostly debug, and it is a text field in this action script container. When the project is published, this is of course invisible. For the work now I let it visible, and what I do first to check that our variable is working, I just enter variables, and you see in the last position the variable external HTML file, and I check whether it is working. So I just throw it in here, and usually I'm making it to left vertical center, and important is auto size, and I give a little bit padding to it, let's say 8 pixels, and so we have something to see, and you can control some values. So let's save it at this point and head over to the main app, and let's see how it looks. So, and now we have our little debug field, and it changes the file name of the HTML file, which is loaded then, and that's usually are doing to control variables while I'm working, and as I said, make it invisible when you don't need it anymore, or when this project is public. A second element I want to integrate into this project is a node title in the upper right corner, and that is a thing which can we do quickly. Head over to the skin and integrate a new text box. It stays on the root of the tree, and name it node title, not with a colon but with an underscore. And usually I don't use capitals as element names, and we have it on the upper right corner and with a little bit distance to the corner. You see it already automatically updated in the background as I have this checkbox unticked. I'll come back to this later because it is pretty important. If you leave it unchecked, every alteration of the skin, any modifying, will be instantly displayed in the browser. And if you check this box, then the updates only happen if you save it. Let's have it for this, so we don't have so frequent updates as we do only change some little numbers or stylings, anything like that. It is more convenient to disable these permanent auto update and only make it on explicit save. And that's what we need now. I remove the background and I remove the border. I don't need any padding. I want to have it right aligned, centered, and auto size. And I want to leave all this typography stuff untouched as I'm attaching a class, and node title will be the class, and I will use some CSS properties not available here later to make my own formatting. So I attach this CSS class here and leave this part untouched. And the text showing up here, I remove this text and go to user data and go to user data title as a placeholder, and this should enter the respective name of the node. And if I make a save, then you see that it is already done here. It is just rough, it will be styled later, but I attached it here as an additional element to this skin and not touching anything from this factory stuff here. Now we come to a really important step in this project and adding the most important part in our skin, and we go to the button bar here, and at the rightmost position of the advanced elements you see draw code element. And if I want to have this, the position doesn't matter, and I usually throw it into this actions and scripts container. This is where it belongs to, and usually I name it JS CSS loader because it is organizing the handling of external scripts, and you can put scripts into it, and I'm just throwing it below here. As I said, the position is unimportant, and now we have some interesting features here. What is the code element? The code element has two parts. The code element custom properties section should be ignored for the moment. We don't need it in this project. It's not very easy to understand and needs some setup procedures which are a bit too complicated now. The section below the code element itself has 3 divisions, and I just explain it in brief. Here you can type in code. This is, as I said in one of the 2 previous tutorials, here you can write code. This is basically the same as you have a normal text field, which is starting with JavaScript colon, and then you're typing some JavaScript code. Here you can type JavaScript code right away. That's what we're doing here. I'm starting with a comment because I don't want to happen anything here for the moment, and nothing in here, and this is just not working. It is just a part of text here, a comment code starting with 2 slashes. What I'm doing first is, as we have an external code editor like Visual Studio Code, I don't want to edit the code here because you have no syntax coloring, no indents, no code understanding, and it is prepared to be done externally because it is a really advanced feature, and most people who write code do it not in such an application like Pano2VR and other applications which are codable, and they do it in their code editors they are used to work with all the day. And here you see an enlargement box. It's the same but only bigger, and here you see a little save button. And this save button, if you let the mouse rest a moment, save to file and make external. That's what we want here. I hit this button and go to my lib folder and name this file custom.js. I enter this, code successfully saved. And you see now, this code is not coming from this box, it is displayed here, and if you click here and type something, nothing happens because it's read-only. And the same is with the pop-up box here. You cannot enter something here, and everything else is done externally. And you can add new files here, then the code is read in here and displayed here, and the editing is externally. The next section is external files. Here you can add some files for being integrated into the skin or into the project. It is the same if you click in the empty space here and you have the external files here. They were already available in version 6, and here you can add some CSS or JavaScript files. They are attached to this skin, and if you head over to the code block, they are attached directly to the code block. And as the code block itself lives in a container, I can create a component from this, and everything what I'm doing here, including the files I'm attaching here, are part of this code element. So I can complete sets of external JavaScript files to be added into this component. They are wrapped into this component container as a file. That is pretty awesome. And now what we need here is I just entered a command, and now it's the time to go to, in the skin editor, to go to view and uncheck live update on save only. And now some magic is happening. I save it here, and if we now go to the code editor and open up the console with F12 here, so we have some output. Then I'm going to the lib folder. Here is my freshly generated JavaScript file, which is externalized from Pano2VR. The Pano2VR skin editor is now listening in the background for changes I'm making here. And now let's have some stuff shown in the console. Hello world. All programmers need to use hello world. And if I save it, it should automatically force Pano2VR to save and to update the image in the browser. And voila, here is standing hello world. So we have an automatic update in the background by Pano2VR. It is just listening what's happening with this external file. And if I'm going to the skin editor, the condition is you need to use it in this code element and to link it externally. If you attach other JavaScript files here, they are not listened for changes, and they are only re-exported and updated if you make a manual update or manual saving here in the skin editor or the main program. You see already the code I typed in Visual Studio Code is now added here. It is just watching it. And this is a pretty great feature. So if you are working on code and just checking it in the browser, you don't need to see Pano2VR. It's happening in the background and you have this update here. If I just change it here for a big H, hello world, save it, and you see a new hello world with a capital H. And this is a really great development feature built in Pano2VR version 7, where you can concentrate on the code working while the Pano2VR app lies constantly in the background, and you don't need to switch between the apps to save it and then update it. If you only use the code editor for linking external files, but not for editing them, then you need always to switch to Pano2VR, hit Controller Command S, and then the output is updated, because you always need an update here with an export to the external files, as we need to have this, what we are doing here in the lib folder, it is exported and copied to output, assets, lib and content. And here you see everything what we have done so far. Here's a file. It is, I didn't delete it from some previous section, so let's do it here for the moment to have a clean output folder here. If you long press this trash can button here, then the image tiles will be kept, but everything else will be deleted. And then we re-export it, and only HTML and external files are updated. And if I now go to back to Visual Studio Code, then we have a clean output, and in the assets lib folder we only have this custom.js file. It's, of course, it is the same. Be aware not to edit this, because it is constantly overwritten if you hit the output or if the project is saved. So keep the output folder closed. After having integrated the code block into our Pano2VR skin, we now going on to add some more stuff. And let's go back to Pano2VR. And I mentioned already the external files section here, and we use it to add a very important tool. I talked about already in the first two tutorials about extending Pano2VR with JavaScript, and this tool is jQuery, and I will integrate it into our project now. Let's move to the browser and make a new tab. This is a jQuery homepage, and you can go to download, and the very simple way is right mouse button on the main download button here to get the minified version with save link as. And now I'm going to my project library, and I just throw it in as it is. I just copy the file name and save it, and then I just go to Pano2VR and enter an external file, double click and select JavaScript and paste the name of the file here. You need to be aware where this file is living, so I'm going to the beginning here, and the folder is, and now we need to have a short look at our project. You have the library folder, and here we have the jQuery 3.7.1 version, and this will be outputted, and that's the important thing, into the assets folder. And this is under asset lib, so we need to add this path to get this stuff working in front of our file name. And here we are going with assets/lib/jQuery. And this is the right location. And as it is already living in the lib folder, Pano2VR will export it here. And as it's linked here, it will already work. So I save it, and this file should already be in our project. And let's check it. I'm just doing a reload here and go to network, and in our loading Q should be jQuery. jQuery is present. Now let's check whether it's working, which is pretty easy. And a standard procedure you can do with jQuery is just head over to Visual Studio Code and say a new section, and jQuery commands are beginning with a $sign. And jQuery is, as I mentioned before in the other two tutorials already, is a shorthand tool for very compact function calls, very handy tools, and saves a lot of code writing, as you have shorthand functions for nearly all stuff you can imagine. Especially in this tutorial, we will have a focus on loading external files and external data. And here we have very compact calls in jQuery to do this, and we will have a look at this later. And now I'm doing a little test with document. This is a standard procedure, and the document is the object. This is a so-called selector, what's coming after the $sign and after the selector, which grabs an object. In this case, it is a document object, and this document object has methods, stuff you can do with it. You have events, stuff that happens, and you have properties, stuff what describes this object. And what's happening here is an event, and these events have names, and one event is ready. Sorry for the typo. Ready, and when this event is fired, it starts with a bracket, and then you can have a function. And this function can have a name. Usually it has no name and has only an empty bracket, because it is a so-called anonymous function. It is directly called and not meant to be called from elsewhere. So you can go the short way, and the function doesn't need a name. And we have two curly braces, and everything else happens in between these pink curly braces. And now let's copy the console call here and said, okay, jQuery is loaded. And now if I save it, the auto update in the background with Pano2VR should work. And here we have jQuery is loaded. You see it comes a little bit later, because this is immediately executed when the code is loaded, and this waits till the complete document, including the Pano2VR project, is really loaded. So this is usually the first test which shows jQuery being correctly loaded and working. Now let's make a short sidestep to complete the lib folder we have here and add an external CSS file to make some fine-tuning on the look of our project. And we go to the lib folder, and I open it and right mouse button, new file, and I'm adding a custom.css file and enter nothing meanwhile, and going to the skin editor and go to my node title, and the node title should be styled. I mentioned it before. The typography is left untouched, and under advanced I added a CSS class. I copy this and head over to my code editor and enter node title, pair of curly braces, and enter some stuff. I want to have a new font size, and it should be 24 pixels, and I want to have it white, color white. You can write the word white, or you can do it in hex code. The white is 6 times F or 3 times F. And now we want to have it bold. This is font weight, enter, B, enter. It is extremely convenient to have these code suggestions and this autocomplete function. And now I save it, and now I will integrate this CSS file into our project and I'm going to the skin editor, to our JS CSS loader, and add a new file. It is a CSS file. Usually I make the CSS files living on top because sometimes the jQuery functions need CSS stuff to work. It's the usual order you find in a lot of websites or web pages, that the CSS is loaded first and then the JavaScript files are coming. So let's add the path here. It's pretty easy. Assets, lib, and it's living the same position as a jQuery file and the custom JS file. So just custom.css, and now this file is loaded. I save it. And after an update, you have the large user title here, and it is black. Why it is black? It was intentionally what I did here. I have a color white here. And if I'm going to the skin editor, here I said I left this untouched, and the color here is black. And what Pano2VR is doing, and we can see it in the browser very nicely. Let's go to the code editor and to the browser. And now let's have an inspection of this header. And you see, if I make it a little bit bigger, you have a node title and you have the inner div where the text is living. And you see the box has a color black. And the inner box, it is inheriting this. It has also color black. It's inherited it from the div above. And then you see, if you mark this inner box, you see my own class here. Custom CSS, line 1, that's where we are here. And you see color has a strike through because it is overruled. Why is it? Because this is inline CSS. You see that the color here, style color, is added directly to the element. And here we have a class name, and the class is defined in another file. So inline CSS always overrules external CSS rules which are coming from a file or are attached with classes. So what we can do to make this white is either go into the skin editor, make it white, but I'm demonstrating a very handy trick here. After the value of the rule, you put an exclamation mark, and then you get the only suggestion which is available here and is important. And if you write this, then this rule will overrule everything else. Save it. And now it should be white. If we get a reload, sometimes the reload is hanging, but you can use a manual reload here, or turn to Pano2VR, make a save, or if this isn't happening, you can make a real export and to make a hard reload. And now the white is taken from my custom CSS. You can see it. Here we have the node title and we have the inner div, so it's inherited, and you can also directly address this inner div of a text box from Pano2VR by writing node title and div. So it explicitly addresses a div inside of an element with the class name node title. And now we can add a little shadow. That's the reason why I did this, because text shadows aren't available in the skin editor, but you can add it manually. Now it's plain white, and now I want to have a text shadow. It's named text shadow, and the text shadow has a few parameters you need to keep in mind. 2 pixels to the right and 2 pixels down to have an offset of this shadow. And now the blur of the shadow, how soft it is the third number. Let's say it's 3 pixels, and then you have a color. Now you can add a color code, or you use an alternative color code, can use an hash, a name, or an RGB value. And if you want to have an RGB value with a little bit transparency, then you use an RGBA value. Red, green, blue, and alpha for the transparency. Now let's add it. And now we have 0 for black. Here we have 0 for black. Here we have 0 for black. And let's say the alpha is about, that's 0.5. And if I now save it, you can have it reloaded from the skin editor. You have here tools, generate output is Option Command G or Alt Control G in Windows, and it is the same as hitting the cogwheel here. And this is a complete new export, and now you see the white user title with a text shadow. After having everything prepared and everything set up for our project, now let's get into the details and let's get our hands really dirty. And the first point is to sketch a little bit the workflow and the basic procedure we need to program to achieve our goal. So first, let's start at the Pano2VR main app. When I change the node by clicking here this hotspot, let's use the Option key to do this in the editor, and we then need to get the information for the node by reading this custom property of the node. This is the first step. What needs to happen? The next step is we head over to the skin editor, and then we want to have this information from the custom property of the node to be transferred to our external JavaScript. This needs to be done by an action, and the action is of course something with JavaScript colon triggered by an action, and the go to URL procedure in the skin editor. And then we need to have a function in the JavaScript, and we have it here in our custom.js, and this custom.js needs to process this information and then grab the HTML file from the content folder. And if I just click one of them, need to extract everything what's inside the body, exactly excluding the body tags to be precise, and then process this information and push it into the information box we see here. That's all. Okay, it's enough to do, but it's not that many steps to follow, and that's what we need to do in this section. The first step we want to have is to get this function, so we can call it from within the skin editor. It's better to create this function first, so I won't call anything undefined. And let's keep this stuff at the top, just for reference. And now we define a function. A function is a procedure you can call by its name. And it starts with the word function. And then we have a name, and I name it get HTML. Functions are case sensitive, so you need to take care about how you write them. And then we have some normal brackets and followed by some curly brackets. And inside this function we can do anything. And every time this function getHTML is called, everything what's inside of the curly brackets will be executed. So let's have a little test, just as we had it already done before. Console log, and then I add some message. Get HTML is called, so that we have something we can see, and to check whether the functions are really called from the skin editor. So I save it, and now nothing is happening because the function is defined here, but it's not called. So that's the first step we need to do, define a function to have it available for calling from somewhere else. Now we need to think about calling this function after we have defined it, and it should be happen in the skin editor to find the right place from where to call this function. So let's switch to the skin editor, and we need to think about when should this happen. If we go to the browser and make a reload to start away from scratch, the new information we need to have in this info box here is needed when we enter a new node. So it is pretty obvious that we need the node change event to trigger this function call. Let's do it. Head over to the skin editor, and usually I attach functions or procedures or everything what is to be done without any user interaction. Not with buttons or something like that, but which should work automatically, especially when we change from one node to another, or what needs to happen on startup, or when all images loaded, or whatever. These actions are usually attached to this container to keep things tidy, and you can attach especially a node change event. Node change, after node change, you can attach it anywhere. It is listening system-wide, so it doesn't matter whether it's attached to mappin or something else, but I usually attach such events only to this actions and script container. Then I know, okay, if I have to look for some automatic stuff, it's happening here. So let's have the event. The event is node change. It's a moment immediately after the new node is entered. So the new node is already available. You have another node change event. It is before node change. That is the last moment the old node ID is valid, but we need the new node ID. So get to node changed, and then the usual procedure is go to URL and then start a call with JavaScript colon, and if this URL is prefixed by JavaScript colon, it is not interpreted anymore as an URL to jump to, but it's interpreted as a call to any JavaScript which is available inside the whole project, or even in our case in external files. So now let's call our function get HTML semicolon at the end, because this is one complete code line in JavaScript, so it needs to look like this. And we have now only this URL call, and I hit OK. Okay, you have seen the reload. And now let's take a look at the browser. And we see already get HTML is called. That's nice, because the first panorama loaded after you hit reload or start a tour, it is already a change. It changed from no node in the beginning to the first node. So we have already a node changed event at the very beginning of our startup procedure. And if I now go to the next node, get HTML is called, and so on. And now we get it one after another. So our signal flow from the skin editor to our custom.js is working. That's the next step we have achieved. And now let's head over to process what we get here. Now we have established a communication between the skin and the external JavaScript. And this is the direction from in to out, from inside the skin to outside. And now we need to prepare a target for the other way around, so that the JavaScript knows where to put the content in. And so we need to find our target text fields in the skin where we need to put into our data. So let's check this. There are two ways to get informations about the target text fields. When I'm now opening this control bar and opening the box here, you see we have a title and a text dummy. That's what we entered in our nodes. When I here go to Spray Riverbank, and then we have dummy. That's user data title, user data description. And we have some possibilities here in the development section of the browser. Please keep in mind that this skin is responsive. What we now see is the info pop-up in the smartphone version. And if I enlarge the screen and close it, or simply do a reload, and if I then open this desktop version, when the information box sits in the lower left corner, while it's nearly full screen when we are on the mobile versions. The probability is high that we have two different boxes or one which scales up. That we need to find out. Sometimes it's a bit tricky in factory skins because they have internal complex construction. So let's have a look how it's built up, and I go to inspect, and then I scroll a little bit up with this separation bar between the browser window and the development section, and you see it's not that instructive here. We have a rectangle, and you see only the generic classes the skin editor attaches to this element, so we have no clue about the names we see in the tree of the skin editor. And so we need to find out this. We have sometimes here, okay, this looks like if I go to a text field. A text field usually in the skin editor has attached the class ggSkin_text. And inside of this text box we have another div where the font formatting happens, and the outer box is usually where the measurements are and the positioning in the screen or in the next level object, in the parent object. And inside of this we have another div, and this div contains the information itself. So we have here strong style, and this looks like we have a little code snippet inside of the div, because this is a text elements text box, the inner div, so-called, and there we have these informations, and we see this is the user data title and this is the user data description. So let's have a look. It's a nice trick to do this. This is obviously written in the skin editor, copy. And in the skin editor you can search for strings. You have a search box here, and if it's inside of some text it may be found. So we have it, strong style and font size 24. This is written in bold as it's a hit of the search. Just click on it and then you have the element where the information sits, and that's exactly the string you see, the code snippet you see here. So this is identified, and now I am attaching some classes to it. It is separated with user data title and user data description. We keep it this way, and now I add a class and name it info-title. And this class will help us either to put some formatting on this headline if we like it, but the main purpose is to identify it inside of our whole skin. And the other way around, you have a div here which contains the user data. Now let's add a class info-text. And now we need to check where these elements are shown in the browser, whether it works what we have done here. So let's keep in mind info title and info text, save it and go to the browser, reload it, or it's already reloaded after I saved it here. And now you can search inside of the HTML code for info title. Enter, and there we have it. So now we have our modified string with a class info text and with a class info title. And as it sits in the lower left corner, it is our desktop version. And here you see, okay, this is sitting on the root of the tree. Here's the info box, and let's mark it by a class. It's easy to do this, and it keeps a little bit orientation inside of the skin. Info box desktop. save it, and go to here. And now let's just hit the search box again. It's nice that the developer box in the inspector keeps the last search string. So just hit enter again. And now we have as a master object here infobox desktop. It's pretty nice to keep these elements named for orientation and for maybe switching some stuff later if it is necessary when we need to keep track of it is a smartphone or is it a desktop or so on. I usually mark elements in the skin editor which may be important for later manipulations by classes. It adds up only a few characters, so it's no matter for file size or making things complicated. It's just for marking up stuff. And now we need to find the other one, because if we hit here the info box, we have something else. And if I go to inspect here, I don't see spray bridge. There's only one word. Where is my dummy? This is the user data title. There is an open source box and so on. And there's a container. I don't know exactly where am I now in the tree. So let's find out. And you can use some other informations you have. Okay, we know this is a user data title and this is the user data description. So let's search for it in the skin. And now let's hit the enter box and just enter the placeholder for user data title. So, and now you get every occurrences where this is used. We have this here. Okay, this is what we already know. And here's another node title. Where is it? What does it do? And it is our node title. So maybe it's somewhere else. And what can we find out else about this? Because it's a little bit hidden here. And let's switch back to the browser. Let's have a look what's happening here. Container. And so we don't have very much hints here of where we are in the tree. And so let's look for the word info. And another trick you can use is if you don't know what variable switches stuff on or off, then you can scroll through the variable list. They may be very long if you have a complicated skin, but you have a variable with info. And now you can search for with info. What is with info doing? Usually it switches off or on an info box. Okay, we have some hotspots which are doing this. We are looking more for elements which receive this variable, not which set this variable. And we can scroll through it and it's not that interesting. I don't find very much. So let's look a little bit further. And we have a variable which looks suspicious. This phone obviously is a set of variables responsive for interactions on the smartphone version of the skin. So let's get this phone info, which looks pretty suspicious. Let's search it. And we have some hotspots here switching around. And we have a node title, variable in condition with phone info. And we have a HT info container. And we have info phone, info pop-up phone. So let's look. Okay. Now we have something that looks pretty interesting. We have a container which has safe area phone. And it contains in the Venice scheme a general pop-up. They put it all together into this container as it has always the same size as we see here. It is covering more or less the whole screen excluding the lower control bars. So this is obviously an interesting candidate for our search. So pop-up phone, and it is 100% minus 32 pixels in the width and minus 90 in the height, so that is really fitting here. And now we have our info pop-up phone as a target for the smartphone version. We need to alter also and to fill in with our external content. So let's check this by adding a class and info box phone. Save. And now let's search for it. Box phone. Here it is. And this is exactly the element we have here. That's very nice. So we are nearly there. And it has two text boxes. And now let's just close it and reopen it again so it is filled with content. And now we have a text box for user data description, and we have a text box for the title. And now it's easy. The next step is easy. We have open source is a title box. Info title, and the other one is info text. This is a little bit a lengthy clip here, but it is necessary to go through these procedures because if you have a factory skin, sometimes it is really difficult to find elements to change them. And it's a pretty special construction here to have a separate container for all the pop-ups in the smartphone version. And we have here the pop-ups in the root level of the element tree to do some different stuff. It's a little bit hidden here in the second or third level below this container. And there we have a background serving as a black box behind all of these pop-ups. And so we have found it. And now let's do a little check. Okay, we have it already. Info text, and we have info title. And if we reopen it, then we have the text box with dummy, and we have the info title. And now we have defined and marked up our targets where the content will be loaded. Now we have the origin of our function call defined in the skin editor with a function call after node changed, and we have also the target objects in the skin editor where to put our text in. So now we take care about everything what's happening in between. So let's head over to our JavaScript and fill this function a little bit with some more than the simple console log call here for just checking it's communicating. Usually I add a comment from where such function is fired, because if we are here now in the script section of our project, it is useful to have some hints where it's fired by node changed. And usually I add the element where this is attached. So let's head over here, and it is usually it's action script copy, and there's a place where this function is attached to. And now let's add this here as an origin. So just as a reminder, I usually make heavily use of comments to keep stuff clear for myself, or maybe for clients who want to change this. And if a project was not on my desk for 2 weeks, I need to remember what I've done there. And it's useful to have some hints about the own work. So let's now go a little bit further. When we want to fetch these HTML files, first we need to know what HTML files. So let's write a line of code, which is pretty useful. Now we want to have the HTML file, which is defined in the user data, custom properties. We want to have this in our JavaScript. Okay, when we go to the skin, we only have a function. It's just calling the function because we don't need any more informations. One possibility is we can add the HTML variable from the user data into here, but it is easily to ask for this directly from the JavaScript, and that's what we are doing now. And we have the variable, we remember the name, it's an external file, just copy it to avoid any typos, and now go to the skin editor and I just add skin variable just as a reminder for myself, skin variable what to fetch. So, and now we want programmatically get this information from the skin. And we define a variable and I name it, let's say, HTML file. The keyword for defining a variable is let, or in older JavaScript versions you might know it is var, also var. Let is a modern version. I'm using let here, and let HTML file, and now I want to have it. And if we want to have a variable from within the Panorama player's object, we need to use a function we can research for in the browser. Go to the JavaScript reference and just look for the word variable and skin variables. And so here we have it. This is a JavaScript reference in the Pano2VR documentation. And what we are looking for is Pano get variable value, and we need a string of the name from this variable. Just copy it and we get this here, Pano get variable value. And now we need a string, so single quotes for us here. And we have the name from our skin editor. I usually copy it, so, and we just enter it here. And to make some check about this working, let's enter console, enter, and now we want to have this variable, and here we have it. This should throw this HTML file when we change the node. Let's check it in the browser. And if we now head over to the console, there already it is. And now let's close this box and reopen it, or just change the node. That's what we need to check here. Melhouse, Republic Square HTML, Federal Chancellery. That is working. Very nice. So we get from outside of the skin and outside of the panorama player, we get the variable valid at this moment from inside, and now we can do something with it. So now we have the file name of the HTML file we want to load, but we need also a path, because this is only a file name and the future loader we are building up here doesn't know where to look for this file. So we need to make sure that this path is defined. As this is stable, the path is here for us. In the output folder we need to take into account, because this is the working version we have when it runs in the browser of the user. We need to have assets, content, and inside of this path we have the HTML files. As we need this independently from this function, and it is static, it doesn't change like this value, we can put it outside of our function and say let, and it is HTML base path. This is just up to you how to name these variables. I recommend strongly to have some descriptive variable names, so you can guess from the name what this is doing or what it is made for. And we have HTML base path here, as this is assets, content, and at the end we have a slash. And now we need a semicolon to close up this code line. What you see here is called camel case. This is an invalid variable name. You get immediately an error here. And you can write underscores if you like for better readability. It's very common to use the so-called camel case. Every new word is starting with a capital letter, and you don't use any dashes, underscores. So you have a single word, and it is nice in the most programs. The double click and you mark all the words. Some programs aren't marking the whole word, only the word until to the next dash or until to the next underscore. So it is pretty nice to have these variables and function names written in camel case like I'm doing it here. So just a best practice remark here. And now let's go a step further and add this up here to build the whole file name we need for the loading procedure coming afterwards. So I needed load path, and this is the path of the file to load, and this is just a concatenation of both of these variables. This static variable, which doesn't change, copy, and I edit. And if I have two strings and I have a plus sign, the plus sign is not a mathematical operation, but it connects two strings. And the last, we name the HTML file, and just as usual, we need to control this. Working console.log, and now we can start to type with L, and we get our variables offered here, and just hit enter and close the line with a semicolon, save it, and now we get assets content federal chancellery at this very moment when we are in this node here. And let's check it. Let's go to another, and we get a correct path to load the future files. Now, as we have prepared everything, we need to head over to the core procedure of this project. We need some housekeeping here to add a command, assemble path for loading files. And now let's start with really loading these external HTML files. Here we need a short introduction about what's happening next. When we are loading an HTML file like our index.html, we have here in our output, which is the file where everything is living in, we need to display the panorama in a website. So this HTML file we see here in the browser, this is loaded by the user when he starts the tour. From then on, this index.html file isn't loaded anymore. It is static, and everything what's now happening, moving the panorama, interacting with this interface, doesn't invoke any loading processes. So if we head over to the network panel here and we switch to all to keep an eye on all files loaded, so you only will have JPEG files loading, and this is already part of what we want. Here we have a loading of only image tiles and some other images and nothing else. If we hit reload, we get all the bunch of files, index.html, the skin.js, custom.js, all the files we need to get our panorama display up and running. And the index.html is the only HTML file we have for displaying this panorama project. If we look a little bit further, then we see that all the images loaded here are not loaded with a user interaction. If I switch back to images and clear up the network, so you only will see new JPEG files from our tiles folder. You see if you let the mouse rest on it, you see these image snippets here. And these files aren't loaded directly by the user. They are loaded by the panorama player. And this is what we call in programming slang is an asynchronous loading. It is not dependent on user interaction, at least not directly by typing an URL into the browser's location bar or by hitting on a button to load something. It is loaded in the background by JavaScript. And this process is, let's have a look at the smart guys in the web. This is technically called an XML HTTP request. That is an historical name. It's not really correct. It is a JavaScript object which can load new files over HTTP standard protocol into the web browser without user interaction, but programmatically. And this is a key feature we need here. The XML is the data file which is originally planned to be loaded by this HTTP request, so hence the name XHR. And you find this here. And here you get all XHR requests if you're doing a reload. So let's have our panorama player here to restart the panorama and to head over network. And if I go to XHR and reload the panorama project, then you see Tour XML isn't loaded directly. It's loaded by the panorama player as an XML HTTP request. And this is a technical condition for something bigger we want to have a look on now. And this is called AJAX. And AJAX is a key mechanism which we need if we want to load files or data not directly by user interaction or without any user interaction, but programmatically by JavaScript, by calls, by functions, and so on. And this is exactly what we need here. You see, Pano2VR itself makes use of XHR and AJAX requests just to work. You see it if you have a website which has only one file here, staying static all the time, and everything else is loaded in the background. Nearly every website you use in the web makes use of this technique. Let's say Facebook, and you load once at the start of the timeline, and new posts will be subsequently loaded by AJAX if you scroll down your posts timeline and so on. Or you have some other listings and you will have the first 20 items on the start page, and then you scroll down, and if you scroll down, the next 10 or 20 items will be automatically loaded if the JavaScript recognizes that you have scrolled down, because scrolling can be found as a JavaScript readable property. Here's a nice graphic just to make it a little bit more instructive here. And if you have a web browser and this is a client plot from the user side, it sends an HTTP request via clicking on a link or typing something in the location bar, and it gets back data, HTML, CSS, or what else. And AJAX is the user interface, sends a JavaScript call, then you have an AJAX engine you need to program or you need to set up in your web project, and this is sending the HTTP request, not directly the user, and it gets back HTML, complete websites, or JavaScript data, or XML. Originally, in the most cases, it was XML, but nowadays it is most of the time very compact JSON data, JavaScript data, and this is received by the engine, and then it's displayed by the AJAX engine via HTML and CSS, and then it's visible in the user interface. So on the way out of the client to the server and coming in from the server to the client, there's this engine in between managing the data flow. That is mandatory to understand if you want to have constructions where external data to load and to be displayed in your web project is working. And this is what we need in our next step. We need an AJAX engine loading our HTML files and displaying this data to the user inside of our skin box we have prepared. To use an AJAX process practically, we have a lot of different possibilities to do that. The most basic one is to program it in vanilla JavaScript. Just about this simple example here, which is presented to us in Wikipedia, and this is programmed in plain JavaScript, and you see there is an internal object inside of JavaScript, which is called XML HTTP request, and you can create new instances from this object and work on them furthermore. This needs some programming. We will take another way to do this, and we go to jQuery as we already have it installed and as we already are using it. And now let's have a look at this function. This is in the API documentation of jQuery, and it's just when you head over to the start page of jQuery, api.jquery.com, and there you find all the documentation. I will sometimes refer to this. And in jQuery, this is a little bit simplified and more easy to write and to understand. And we have just this simple construction, $.ajax, and then we have some different stuff inside or afterwards. I will go into details furthermore. And let's start now with this jQuery AJAX process to have it up and running here. And I'm going to all, and so we have all our loading processes here again on the screen, and I'm heading over to the console as our debugging tool. And now let's construct this AJAX process to load our file. For this, we head over to our JavaScript file, and I save it, and we make some place here and load external HTML file as a comment header. And now we are starting away with the $.dot, and now if you type AJAX, then we need a bracket, as this process can accept a lot of parameters and options. And now we add a pair of curly braces and a new line here. And here we add one basic parameter of this function, just the URL. And the URL is our load path. And this is the first action we have here. And this line isn't to be closed with the semicolon, as it is enclosed in curly braces. And you can have a lot of parameters here, even more, or not only the URL, but this is a mandatory single one, and you can add a lot more. If you want to dive into this, just head over to the API documentation, and you see some parameters like the data type you want to have, or what is accepted from the server, and so on. There are a lot of stuff, and the parameters this object function here accepts is pretty large. It is very detailed, and you can add a lot of different options here. And the mandatory one is the URL, because you want to fetch something from an external file, so you need at least this URL. And here's a more simple example, and you can have a closer look into documentation for it. This is a basic core of this function. You need minimally to work. You get nothing as an output from here. It is just loading, and we need some data we are receiving. And if the function is only this little part here, then it wouldn't work. So we need something more. And this function or this object has some events. attached to it, and we have an event. Its name is done. And if done is called, if the process is completed and the data is received, and it was a successful loading without errors. And this done has two brackets afterwards, and in this bracket you can add a function. So the function contains something. What's happening then? Let's make a comment, loading, okay, then do something. And now we can at least check the loading being successful by console.log loading successful. So as we are inside of a function, there are no normal command lines here and normal code lines, and they are of course closed with semicolon. Now let's save this, and voila! As this function is called on a node change, we get a successful loading here. So the process is telling us it was successful. If there was an error, this done function isn't called. So now let's do something more. As we know now that our loading is successful, let's find out what we get back from this function, what we are receiving, and to find out something about the data we get from this AJAX process. The done method and the function can be extended with some parameters, and one parameter is I want to find out, or I want to do something with the data, and this is a fixed word here, and the data is essentially that what the function returns. And so let's have a look on this console.log, and let's have a look on this data to find out what it is. So, and now if I'm hitting save, we have a reload, and now we get something interesting, and we get something which starts with HTML. There is something JavaScript here, some stuff, and then it returns. Furthermore, below this JavaScript block, we have the HTML block we have in our HTML file here. Let's switch to it. This is a bridge here. That's exactly what we see here. And we have some JavaScript inserted here from Pano2VR, but we don't care about right now. And let's check what this data type is. And you can analyze data to prepare yourself for further treatment of this data type of. Will tell us what kind of data is it. And this is a bit important here, as we need to treat this data we get back from this AJAX function in the correct way. So let's save it. And it is a string. A string is basically a chain of characters without any function. It is just for being read or for being displayed or something like that. A string is not code, and a string is only data. And now we need to turn this data into HTML so we are able to display it, because we need a valid HTML. HTML is not a string. It is a language made to display content in a correct way and to scaffold for JavaScript and CSS to function and to be styled. So let's have a look on another concept we need here. In the next part, we have a closer look how to convert this simple string into a valid HTML file we need to throw in our text box later. As we now found out, we have a simple string getting back from our AJAX engine, and now let's convert it into something useful for our purpose. And let's convert this string. In JavaScript, you have an object which can convert strings into HTML code which is correct related to the document object model, the so-called DOM. Let's do this, and I explain later what these single steps are for getting this. So let's create a new variable with the word let, and I call it simply parser. And a parser is just this part of a programming language which reads in something and converts it to something else. In this case, we need a parser who can convert a string to a valid document object model code, simple HTML. And this parser is a built-in object in JavaScript, and it has a name. And this object is prepared to have instances. So we take it like a blueprint, and the word new says, okay, I want to have a new instance of this object, and the object itself, it starts with DOM, and you see you get a suggestion list here, and here we have our document object parser, and it accepts some parameters, as you can use some functions for it. But we don't need it, so these brackets stay empty. And now this parser, this variable, it is not a string, it's not a number, it's an object. And this object is created so that we can do something with it. And the next step is, let's comment it here to keep some explanations for it. New converter instance. Let's make it a little bit detailed. It is not totally correct, but it describes what it does. And now let's operate this on data, which we found out is a simple string. And let's create a new variable, and I call it htdoc, as it is kind of an HTML document what we get now. And for this we call this parser object. So we grab these converted data, or we grab this data and feed it into this newly created converter we just set up. And this parser object has a method parse from string. So we are telling this object, get a string and parse it to a valid document object part. And here we need some objects, and that's very nice. If you're using Visual Studio Code, you get an explanation what's expected next. If I started with an empty bracket, then this Visual Studio Code knows, okay, it's JavaScript, and I had type parse from string. Okay, parse from string needs something. And what's pointed out blue here, it is a string. And what is a string? The string is our data. And now let's hit a comma, and then it gets on with the explanation. Now the next argument, this was the first, we already have it done here. And now the type, what type of data do you want to get out? And as it is HTML, we want to get here, you type the text, you need it typing the string text /HTML. So now this parser knows I need to read in this string, and what we want to get out here is HTML text. And now we want to have a look on what we have achieved here. So console log, and now let's inspect htdoc, as we want to see what we are getting here. So save, and we have an error. So where is this error coming from? The loading is successful. Okay, the error is pretty clear. I typed my console log control output here after the bracket, and htdoc is defined inside of a function block, so it is not valid here. It is a nice example, this error, to have a short note on the scope of variables. A variable inside of a function is only valid between this bracket and this bracket. Outside, it is not known, so it is not defined, as it pointed out here. So if I want to have this console log here, I need to define this variable outside of it. But I don't need it here. I cut it out and put it on the right position, so now it should work. And if I now reload it, I get not a string, but I get an HTML document. That's great. That's what we want. And if I unfold it, you see all the objects inside. You can unfold the body, and inside of the body you have some children, and these children is H1, and H1 has the text Marie Elisabeth Lüdersbridge, and the inner HTML is the text we want to have. And if we go to the next children, the paragraph, we have the inner HTML here, and that is the part we want to have. So now we have an HTML object we can navigate and where we can fetch detailed data from. So this was the essential part to get these simple data we get, a simple string, into an object, what we can treat way more detailed as a simple string. The next step is a bit of a convenience step, but it makes life a little bit easier. So let's convert the DOM object to a jQuery object. It's pretty simple. I just copy this line here and let's check it, how it's working. We just put a $sign in front of the htdoc, and now let's directly extracting it into the console log message, or let's make it better to live in a variable, and I type jhtml and enter this here, so we have only one variable, don't need the brackets here furthermore. So let's get it this way. It's a little bit easier to understand and to explain. So let's save it here, and now let's have a look what is happening now. And now we get an object, and inside of this object we get the HTML document, and it is an array. So we have with one item, the first item is always 0, and it is wrapped inside of a jQuery object, which offers us some convenient methods to just find sub-elements, and that's what we need in the next step. So we want to extract parts of this. And one part is, let's get the headline. I just save it at this moment, and let's have a look at one of these HTML files. So we have a document object model with inside of HTML. We have a body object inside. It is H1 for the headline and P for the text we want to have as an info text. So let's head over to custom.js and let's say let, and let's say info title. And now we have a very convenient way to get some sub-elements. I just take this jQuery object, and inside of this jQuery object we have a method, it is simple find. And in find you can say, okay, what do you find? And I want to have H1. And this is just our H1 tag inside of this HTML file. And what we want is, inside of this object, we can just do it in one procedure. And you just can get the HTML inside of this object to get exactly what we want to. And now let's console.log, and we won't have info title. And now let's check what the result is. Voila! Here is the ready to use headline we want to have. And now it's easy to just copy it, info text. And now you see how useful jQuery is, as we now just only need to change some characters here and save it. And here we get the headline, and here we get the paragraph, exactly as we need it. As we now extracted just the needed part from the loaded HTML file, we now have only one step left to put this into the right elements of our skin. So I just add a comment here, extract needed parts of loaded HTML. So character too much, and now let's have a new step here, fill in HTML data into skin elements. So now let's have two command lines, skin elements classes. I just make some notes here to have it a little bit handy here, and we just head over to Pano2VR and inspect our text boxes we want to fill. So we have in the mobile version, we have this info pop-up title, and in the other box we have this section where we have manually added the classes info title and info text separated by a dash. And here we have two separate elements which have the respective classes info title and info text. So we get back to this in our code editor, and that's what we need: info title plus info text. So there's a nice function in jQuery which makes it pretty easy to load this data where it belongs to. We start with a $sign as usual, and now we are adding our elements: info title, and as we are referring to a class, we need a dot in front of it, and this box has a property, and this property is HTML as its content. You see, we already used it here, and here we want to get information from this element, so we have an empty bracket here. But you also can use this HTML property to set some info. And now let's just take this variable and fill it into the HTML. And now let's check whether it's working. And we just copy this, and it's pretty easy. Info text, and we have info text here. Info text, it's offered already from the code suggestion, and now it should be transferred to our respective skin elements. So let's save it here, and now we need to open this box here, and voila, here we have the text from our HTML file. And if we now head over to another node, everything is switched. Or here, the Republic Square, now it's working. Now we are really finished, and now it's only left to format this text, as it is pretty much unformatted from the skin. And that's the last step left for us, but the main function is to transfer this text from our external data. So which I do a short recap. You load a file. When it's successful, the done procedure starts running and it accepts a function, and this function has data as an argument, so you can get a grip on the data it's receiving, and you get a string. We found out this here, and then you need to parse it from a simple unoperable string to a valid working code with a parser, and this parser is set up as to parse this string into a text HTML, and that is a document object model code. So we have a valid HTML document. For convenience, we convert it into a jQuery object so we can handle it with some methods we find to get subparts of this document, and also we use jQuery to throw the extracted data, the extracted texts here into title and into text. And this is a very, very basic and extremely widespread and popular technique to load external data to be shown in a HTML page, which keeps being static all the time. But inside of the static HTML file, our index.html here, there you can have some manipulations at runtime without reloading the whole page. That's the main purpose and the magic of AJAX. And you can do a lot of stuff. This is a very, very simple example what we set up here. And we have a great way to separate content from presentation. As for presentation, we have a ready box inside of our skin element, but the data is delivered later and can be changed at any time while this layout is stable and static. We are now slowly coming to an end with our project, and we need some little tweaks to be added here to our function. This function relies on being the load path correct and being these files existent in the respective folder. But sometimes, let's say in larger projects, there may be some errors, and we need to catch these errors and to display something so that we can search for an error or repair this or what else. And we have a done procedure attached to this AJAX object, and we now add simply another one. Just after this bracket, we can continue with the next procedure we have if the AJAX object is failing or throwing an error for what reason ever. And now we have also a function. This is an anonymous function which is immediately executed and doesn't need a parameter, in our case like data, but we can add parameters if we want, but I omit it here, and just have some stuff to notify here. And let's say we have console.log and loading error. And to test it, let's simply introduce an error. Now it's working, so we have no problems here. And the most simple way is to add some extra here. Let's add an XX after the HTML file. So the file name is for sure incorrect. And if we save it now, we should get a loading error because there is no file HTML XX. So this is working. And what you can do else is just head over to these two objects we have here. And so if something goes wrong, as a comment here, and now we can paste this in here, and let's say we have error, and for the text we had something went wrong. So now let's test it. And so you can display your error not only in the console, but a normal user isn't looking at the console, it's only for developers. And we have now an open text box here. We see this error really displayed to the user. So he said, okay, there's something wrong with it, and I need to call the website owner to repair it. So this is about catching errors, or you can display anything else, or you can set a variable inside of a skin in case of an error to just hide this box so it's not working anymore, or hide this button if this content is not working. You have a lot of possibilities, but you have a function which reacts on errors, and if I remove my artificial error here, everything should work as it should. As a very last step in our project, we need to do some CSS tweaking to format this inserted text and to do some data housekeeping to make this project being finished. So let's have a look at our text box here. We have this element, let's inspect it, and we have this info title, and now we want to have a little bit larger fonts here. And we have this info title class not only for identifying and finding these elements in the skin editor or in the skin, but we also can use it for styling. So let's head over to the custom CSS and add some new class named info title. Font size should be 24 pixels. Save it. Now we have no auto reload when we change or save the CSS file, as custom CSS isn't watched by the Pano2VR skin editor. We only have this JavaScript file here being saved. The other is only read in and marked as external file, so we need an extra save here to make it valid. And now we have the 24 pixels, and we need font size, and now we need to make it bold, and we have a font weight bold, and that should be enough for this. And we can also tweak the paragraph info text. And now let's have a look what we want here. Font size 14 pixels, and this should be enough. Save, go to Pano2VR, save it, and now it is updated here. And we now have here, when we inspect it, there should be a text size of 14 pixels, and it is here. So now the project is nearly finished. The last thing to do here is to make this debug text field invisible. You can leave it in here, it doesn't matter. So we have it out of our way. If you want to be sure, place it outside of the screen area. You can remove it completely, it's no problem, but it is only a little help, and you can recreate it at any time later. So as a wrap up of the whole project, we have an external JavaScript which loads external HTML files as a text content for our info box here. And the great advantage of having such constructions is that we can have these external files being edited by the client, for example, or being produced by somebody else. And for changing this text and editing it, you don't need to go to the Pano2VR project and change all this stuff in the user data section. So you need to reopen the project to re-export all files. And if you're using such external data constructions, you have the ability to leave the Pano2VR project and its output completely alone and just change external data. So no manipulation and no modifying is to be done, neither in the main Pano2VR file nor in the skin. So everything can be left alone and you can edit the content of your project as you like.